Okay.
Yeah, we can see you. Wait, did it start already?
Yeah, I think it did.
Oh, hi, Marianne.
Okay, I'm just humming and enjoying myself. All right.
This is only going to Marianne, right? Does anybody else see these videos?
Well,
maybe future generations of this course.
Oh, that's awkward.
Okay, so as planned, we were going to start with Sarah after prayer. So hello, Marianne. Hopefully you are having a lovely day. I hope so. Okay, so your piano learning summary. We'll pray for Spirit Week and some events that are going on. Games this weekend. And just for healthy minds, healthy bodies this week. If you think to pray for the music this Thursday, I would appreciate that. Very exciting. I'm getting over my cold and coughing spells. And I'm glad that wasn't Thursday so that I can hopefully not have that be a distraction. All right, let's pray. Father, we thank you for this beautiful day. We thank you for the rain and the reminder of your care. I pray that you would just be with our class, help us to learn, help us to develop into the teachers that would honor you. I pray that you would help us to be committed to excellence. Also, that we would be filled with love for all the students you give to us. Help us to see them as you do, as people with a soul and needs, that you would help us to be patient and filled with love and concern for each student. I pray that you would bless this time. We thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So Sarah, while she's getting that all pulled up, I did put on Canvas the little video of Olivia and Lily in that brief lesson. I'm going to hopefully do a video a week of a different thing. So I have a junior high student. I'm hoping, with her permission, to video, not her entire lesson, but a portion of her lesson. So you get a bird's eye view. You can't come visit me in your schedule. You're all busy. I get that. But I want you to see, you're going to do observations anyway. However, I want you to see some of the things I've done. And you'll see that I sometimes don't successfully implement things. And sometimes the kids are rowdy and wild. That's the reality of dealing with humans instead of textbooks, that they have emotions and actions. So anyway, let's turn it to Sarah. What was your piano journey like as a young girl?
Okay, so I started music when I was like really little. I took like 2 years of violin lessons and I absolutely hated it. So I didn't learn like anything, and I was like, why are you music? I don't want to come. I don't like this teacher. And so like I would just go and I would just give the teacher a hard time.
How old were you?
Now I was like 3 to 5 years old, so I was really little. My older sister did it too, and so like my mom would take both of us and like we'd sit there and watch my older sister, then it'd be my turn, and so that's what we did. And then finally my mom let me quit because I was just throwing that big of like fits during my lessons. It was really bad. Anyways, so yeah, I just was like, I'm done with music, and I like didn't really do anything with it for like 5 years, like 5 years after that. Till I was like 10, like besides like school things, like singing choir.
Sure.
And then when I was in 5th grade, we got this choir teacher. His name was Mr. Jansma, and he started like doing really fun stuff, and he like made music really exciting, and he was just like super into it all the time, and like he like his face would get red like when he was like super passionate about talking.
He has red hair
things.
too.
Yeah, he's like he was just like he would get really loud, and he was just like so animated. Yeah, he just made like music class so fun. And we had a piano at my house, and like after like I started like actually like retaining things and like soaking things up during his music classes, I'd go home and I would just like try to do them on the piano and things like that, and like clinking them out. And my older sister took piano lessons, but like I didn't take them because I hate music or whatever. And so yeah, and then like music class started to become my favorite class.
And
And
that was fifth grade?
Fifth grade. Yeah, I started to like love it again, and well, love it for the first time, I guess. And so I just kept wanting to do more and more music, and I'd always be that little kid that would like stay back and talk to Mr. Jansmer, like, can I go into like from recess and go like hang out with the music teacher? And so yeah, that's what I did, and then I would go home and start teaching myself piano. But like I didn't want to tell anyone that I had started to like music, because I was like, oh, I always whined about music, I hate music. So I'd just go home and like play as much as I could, try to learn like how to read the music notes and everything, or like whenever we'd go to bookstores, we like never really went to the library, but like we'd always go to Barnes and Noble, and my mom would just like sit there for like a couple hours, and like she'd be like, oh, go read or whatever. And so I always go to the music section with like all the music theory books and all, like other things like that, and I would just sit there and like try to learn them. But then that didn't really work too well, so I started like actually like writing my questions down, and I would take them to Mr. Jansma during extra time or recess or something like that, and he would start like teaching me little things here and there. And he'd be like, oh yeah, if you come in tomorrow during recess, like we can continue talking about this and stuff like that. So I would do that a lot, and then I'd go home, and like we had like this one hymnal in my house. It's like all of the music that we really had that I could like touch, because I wasn't allowed to touch my sister's stuff. And so I would like start to like write in the names of the notes on this little hymnal, and yeah, I would start like playing them, plucking them out on the piano. And so that's what I would do for a long time. And then finally, like after like I was like Allison, where like me and my sisters went into phases and then went out of them. So like my parents were like, okay, she's gonna get over this after a while. She's not gonna like it anymore. But it just kind of kept growing. And so finally they talked to Mr. Jansma about like teaching me piano. And so he didn't really have any extra time out of school, because he also like was an arborist, and so he cut down trees. And so he was like, well, maybe I could work something out with your teachers. You're a good student. Maybe I could like, they would let you like split a class with like your best subject or whatever. So I started to miss English class for piano lessons, like about 20, 30 minutes of piano lessons maybe. So yes, so I did. And
aside for BJ Jansma, I went to school with him and a lot of his siblings, and traveled with Katie, his sister. He wore pajamas and a nightcap to play Chopin Nocturne. And it wasn't a casual classic, it was like a normal recital, which just demonstrates his creativity. And that eccentric and jovial nature serves so well to make music fun and engaging and creative, and he had no inhibitions. Like, okay, so everyone else was dressed up and normal. He dressed in his nightgown and little nightcap. So he was right here. Keep going.
So like, then I wrote something down about the lessons. They were very informal, mostly just my questions, or him trying to teach me how to read the music. So like my lessons consisted of questions, playing, and then ear training, where like he'd be like, okay, stand on the other side of the piano, I'm gonna play something else, tell me what I just played. And so that's what we would do. I put, he was always enthusiastic, constructively blunt, which he's like a very blunt man, but like it's not mean when he says it. He also liked learning, like when I had questions he didn't know the answers to, we would both like look them up, and so he like just kept, he loved learning. And he'd always be like, he encouraged me to take risks. During the music, he'd be like, I'd be like, ew, I don't like how that sounds. He'd be like, do something different, like do whatever you want. And I'm like, okay. And then he was like, okay. He's like, that wasn't good, so play what's written now. And I'm like, okay, you're right. And then he'd always point everything back to God. And yeah, and so once I started taking these lessons, I'd go home and practice after all my homework was done. And I never really practiced for a set amount of time. It was just like, I got my homework done as fast as I could so I could go play until like my parents or my grandparents were like yelling at me to stop because it was like late and I was waking everyone up. And I practiced, yeah, as long as my mom would allow me with as much material as I could gather. It wasn't until I was like in intermediately leveled that I started using actual piano method books.
Interesting.
So when I first started learning to read, I played from that hymnal I was telling you guys about that we had at our house. And once I started meeting with Mr. Jansma, my grandma, my grandparents lived with us my whole life, and so whenever she'd go to yard sales or stuff, she'd always like pick up the random sheet music, and so that's what I had at my house. And so then after a couple of years, I started using the Faber Piano Technique series, and I flew through them within a year and a half or so. And then I started collecting my own books of classical music from different teachers. So like just teachers at school and stuff like that who played piano, or for Mr. Jansen, he would give me his books, or ones that he recommended for me to buy. I kept playing from then on and would always come back to Mr. Jansma periodically for help or stylistic suggestions. And so,
when did you start lessons with Mr. Jansma? Like, when you would be English?
like about 6.
Okay. Wow. So, what can we learn from Sarah? And Mr. Jansma, too.
Make music fun.
Make music fun.
Because they remember this through.
Oh, goodness.
Terrible.
I think something else. It's too bad your first teacher wasn't great. Because you obviously have an ability in music, but it was kind of turned off a little bit in your early study. So that's why I tell you, if you're going to do preschool, embrace it, love it, be terrific. If you don't feel like you can be that, don't do it. Okay? Make sure that if you're going to do it, that you put 100% of yourself into it and that you make it fun. You change your perspective, because it's like totally different teaching a 3-year-old as it would be to a 6th grader interested in music. Your attention span at that point, you could have sat there for quite some time. So I know Mr. Jansma, and very enthusiastic person. And will you resonate with every student you have? Will some people not like your bluntness and directness? Sure. But for Sarah, he was just what you needed to make a spark. And my husband is very over the top with his music students. He sends me videos, and he does not going to post them just because of the laws and keeping everybody's information secure. But he's over the top, and he comes home with like every day he gets like 20,000 steps because he's busy, he's active. It's not just kids do this activity. All right, good job. Now he is engaging with them and doing the activities right there with them, just as active and busy as they are. And so for a lot of the students, they said it doesn't feel like a subject. It feels like almost like a recess. Do you think that's a successful turn of perspective? Where the old teacher did a lot of like worksheets and more. I'm not saying that they don't have their place. I think they do. However, how are we going to create a spark within a child? A worksheet or an experience? What do you think? So, Miss Price, you remembered those off-the-bench activities. You loved that. You missed it when you didn't realize you loved it until you didn't get it, right? So we need to be aware of, sometimes we're adults, so we don't want a stimulating off-the-bench activity. We find them silly. But we need to see that there's great value in it. So hopefully we can learn from Sarah and be patient with students. It may take a while for that spark that you might be really working to develop this student. But all of that pouring into even early on, was it wasted? Those lessons that she had? No, sitting and listening to your sister, you've had all of these oral experiences. It wasn't wasted. And keep that kids, they may take a while to click with like, this is my thing. I think I'm really passionate about this, or I really enjoy this. So hang in there. And each of you had a very different experience. But it seems like universally there was one person that was really inspiring for all of you. And they weren't the same personality. Did you notice that? Not all of you had the same, but they were passionate, was consistent. They cared about their students, and they were very creative. That was true of all four. They really looked to give creative experiences. So, traits of the average child. Unless anybody has more, that y'all look very tired. All right. So, traits of the average child. And I'm thinking an average child to start instrumental lessons, piano lessons particularly, would be age 6 to 8. Okay. I would say 90% of the books that we have, so Alfred series, Faber series, Bastian series, they say between 2nd grade and 3rd grade, maybe 1st grade, depending on the maturity of the child, is targeting that. So have any of you worked in Sparkies or with 1st to 3rd grade? Okay, I'm working in Sparkies this year. They texted me and said, hey, would you be open to considering? And that is a ministry that I'm not amazing with, but I can do fairly well. I love that age group. So what can they do at age 6 to 8? How big are their hands?
Big as mine.
They're small. They're small. Can they reach the floor very easily?
Well, they can get down to the foot.
But if they're on the piano bench, they may not be able to reach.
Pedal.
Basically like mine.
Yeah.
Basically, Sarah.
I am 6 to 8.
Now, with a little one, sometimes the same hand size may have a different hand span. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, I don't have amazingly large hands, but I do have a fairly wide span. Sarah has a good span as well, even though her hands are little. So I have this thing that can measure your hand span, and I got to play on a 7/8 size piano this summer. Really, really cool. All the keys were just an
I feel like
8
that would
small.
throw me off so
That
bad.
would be weird.
It was a little bit, but it's amazing how your eyes adjust.
Well, because like a lot of times, like I'll just play by feel,
Yeah.
and I like won't even look down, and I feel like I would just miss notes, like miss the interval.
It would take some work, but it is amazing. Like, I could reach a 10th with these.
Oh, yeah, that'd be nice.
So that was
Some of the
pretty
pieces
cool.
I play, it's just like
Logan.
why?
I've played on those little keyboards.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Fish almost cut the whole thing.
Yeah. Sam's Club has one of those right now.
Oh, it's so cute.
It is.
It's so cute.
Okay. So, really, 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 really important. There's so many activities early on that can be done as games and off the bench and fun. So the video I posted is just kind of like a smorgasbord of crazy things. And they were very crazy. You probably would only want like to do 2 or 3. I just wanted to kind of give you like a fire hydrant of ideas of things that I tried. And you can see that sometimes it's going to be like you hit a home run. Other times you bunt or you foul. It's okay and move forward. But I want you to have a big bag of tricks that you can try. Because if you see that they're not getting it, and it happened with my own kids, that the explanation was not enough, and so I need to recircle around the barn to give them more scaffolding so they'll get it next time. Use a good sense of humor. So stuffed animals, Barbies, silly things. And sometimes what I'll do is I'm going to play your piece. And I'm going to show you, and you're going to tell me how my posture was, and I give them a list of things to watch for. And I give them my whiteboard, and they're going to be the teacher for me. And I'll slump, and I'll play with flat fingers and do all kinds of naughty things. And they get to give me a ranking, and they love that. And so they can learn by other ways as well. So instead of saying, you're not curving your fingers, which we tempted to do it 3 billion times, just helping them to maybe see it from a different perspective. Getting to be the police is fun. Depending on the child, I usually don't take, unless it's a preschool child, I don't expect them to read. But if I'm going to take an average age, then I'm going to ask if they can read, or at least they're beginning to read, because that's a good indicator of me of readiness for the typical method. And if they're not reading, no matter their age, I usually do go to the one for the younger beginning. Just so it's not too fast-paced and they don't like it because it's too much. They love to learn, especially at that age. They don't have fear as much as when they're a little bit older. When they're age 10, you might be a little bit more timid. You had a relationship already, so that kind of makes you feel more safe in a learning atmosphere. But just be mindful that they won't be as scared of making a mistake in front of you between age 6 and 8, which is a good thing. It's a great time to start. They would be very silly. Utilize the silliness. Instead of resenting it, you can't beat them, join them, okay? Being silly. I have dress up things like wigs and silly things I pretend to wear, be Beethoven with a funny wig. That is really, anything could become something silly and fun. Go to a Dollar Tree and get a mustache, and you can change your personality for a moment. So they're really terrific. In the video, one of the things I thought was funny is Lily and Olivia. Lily said, I just love the piano. She didn't play piano, the piano. And they were wild. They were very distracted. They came in, they said, hi, toward because they knew I was recording. She said, when we did an activity with crayons in the workbook, can I eat the crayons? No, you cannot eat the crayons. That was not the learning activity. And notice, I'm working on getting that all sorted. They were drawn to that. So that's a lesson for you guys. Declutter your room. If you don't want them to be fiddling with it, get it out of there. So they came to find like anything I had out was like, oh, what's this? It's just like little squirrels. So that is why I'd love to have a space somewhere here that would be just for preschool, because they do have a harder time with a lot of stimulus. So they're super hyper. They put the Barbie here to watch the TV. So super ridiculous. Now, I mentioned this prior, but this is something that really amazed me. For whatever reason, I'm not even sure why, my 6-year-old, she just turned 6 today. Happy birthday, Lily. She had more attention than my 8-year-old. Now, it might have been the time of day or how stressful the day at school was. I have no idea. But just remember that just because these are traits, a child may be different at a different stage. So just be aware of that. Write notes in the interview of observations. Like, wow, that's so still, and they're so attentive. So your planning should be adjusted because of that. If you know you have a squirrel that you're teaching, you better be really energetic when you get ready. So I'm not going to, we could go to the link of the YouTube video. I did put it on Canvas. I just put it today. You looked. I realized that I got it ready, but I never put it on Canvas. So this morning I put it on Canvas. So it should say, okay, here they are. They're super loud. Okay, super loud, super crazy. I'm just going to zip ahead a little bit. Okay. This is where we're doing board activities on the floor.
I want you to find the high F. Good job.
They have like a contest.
All right, I want you to find middle
to find that. Zip ahead.
There is something.
We're doing finger numbers. So lots of songs and singing. I have a jar. I have more rings to add to it. You guys should have a jar with rings for finger numbers. Not for a boy, but I have for a boy like footballs, so that when they're learning how to identify, I just have them put their hand together and wiggle your thumb, wiggle your 2, your 3. First, I have to identify all that, but then they can put, okay, now put Tinkerbell on left hand, finger 5, and then they can do that. That's like an activity to start engaging. How many times do they think of their fingers this way on a daily basis? Do you think they ever do that? No. And they can, you might even send them home with a little baggie of rings, and they could, even in the car, start experimenting with that a little bit. There are lots of coloring games too. Yes, Allison?
Probably also confusing if they play string instrument as well.
Super. You need to address. And Lily is doing violin. And yes. Now, the thumb, because he just has a different job. He's like a support staff, okay? Then we rename these because you have to use them. He's usually number 1. He's very still important, but he's just going to be more of an anchor. And then 2, 3.
Like I could see that being
Yeah,
super confusing.
it
and
could
kids
be.
going between.
Yeah.
They're totally
It
different.
could be, but they need to be aware that in piano we do use a different system. And that's where in the interview, are you involved in other lessons? So that you address that. Kids are very smart. They can learn 2 languages, right? And they understand intuitively when to use it and when not to. It's actually harder for us than for them. So it's harder for an adult to do that than a child. If you tell them, violin, we have this. Piano, we have this. They are pretty amazing. The older they get, the harder that will become. There's seasonal ones, but that's just a great off-the-cuff, quick thing you can do. And that could be confusing. And what you could do is like, okay, so this is typically your, and we don't do any finger numbers with a bow hand. And just maybe violin, you can write on their violin hand, and then piano, you could maybe write over here, so they have a clear distinction. So creativity there would be helpful. So I use Skittles and Starburst where they could find things. I didn't bring in Bingo, but I have music bingo, and as soon as someone gets 5 in a row, then we get to eat the ones we already have out on the board. It seems like, oh goodness, make sure the parents are okay with them eating candy. But I've never had a parent that wasn't like, that had a problem with it. And they end up getting like 10 of them. Is 10 out of 10 Skittles gonna like be terrible? No. I mean, yeah. Okay, let's skip ahead to here.
Send them home.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so some activities I addressed one at a time, others I didn't. And part of it too is sometimes if you can give multiple activities when you do have a semi-private lesson, that's really important. And that's why have one of those whiteboards. I just got another 2 at Menards for just like $1. Because they're so handy. When you're quick on the spot and need to change gears, you can create it into anything you possibly want. Because you could be like, turn around, let's do a listening activity. You write down if I played a second, a third, or a fourth. And they can write it on the board. Super easy, super fast. You write down if it was loud or soft or whatever. Enough on that. So you can watch it. It's a little bit over the top. Not scary isn't the word. Let's go back to that. There we go. Okay. So I don't want that anymore. Fun. This is when it is lovely to be me. Okay. Methods to be considering. I have a lot put over in that music resource library. Have you checked it out where those are? That's what you can use for your piano method review project. Okay. Obviously, if you want to look at more, I do have more. I have quite a few over there. I could have had you analyze every single one under the sun. that would be exhausting. And most likely you are not going to use Robert Pace. Robert Pace passed away. No one is revitalizing his and updating his information. Would you rather have a method that has apps and audio files you can click on one button and have in an instant? Or do you want cassette tapes that you'll have to purchase something special to play and provide access somehow to the parents? Where the parents can download the app too. FJH method, they have Succeeding with the Masters. You have some of those. They sent some. I tinkered around with those. I taught from them. I used that with one little boy. He was very, very smart, but he had dysgraphia. And I tried to study and learn as much about dysgraphia as I could. He had a writing problem. So he could understand far beyond what he could write. So he loved math, but he was terrible at penmanship, spelling, anything with written. But he could read well. So it's just very interesting. But when he would go to convert his knowledge into written form, terrible. Just had a really hard time. So with him, I did not want him to feel like his sister was progressing faster than he was. So Noah and Ellen, cutest little kids. And so I put him into Succeeding with the Masters, and he was fascinated with composers. So Succeeding with the Masters, they choose a lot of composers like Beethoven, Mozart, and Haydn, and they pick their easiest pieces and arrange them for the particular age. And they share facts about it, and he just loved that. He loved that. And I would say it's maybe a little bit on a moderate pace. It's not a fast-paced method. So it was a good fit for him because he was so fascinated. He loved listening to the piece that it was an arrangement for. So like Dvorak's New World Symphony, he could listen to that and connect with the music that way. So that was a great method. I haven't done a lot with Hal Leonard. Sometimes what I'll do, whatever the student transfers with me, I finish the current book they're in, and then just make the parents aware that I'm probably going to convert them into a different method. That way they're not having to purchase right away, but that they are aware that we're probably going to change. But it's fun for the kids to finish and do the certificate. Now, if they are brand new students, of course I would start with what I'm most hoping. I learned with Alfred. So it's been around quite a while. I'm 36 years old. It's a good method. There's nothing wrong with it. There are some things that they do have a ton of supplementary resources. Sometimes presentation of like the dotted rhythm is maybe not as strong. They don't give as much reinforcement or as many oral experiences. But if you have your wits about you, can you make up for that and just incorporate a ton more? So just be mindful that don't lean too hard on the method because it's not designed to be the teacher. You're the teacher. Something that is nice, Alfred does have teacher manuals. I have some of those. It can give you lesson plans and kind of the pedagogy that's kind of behind everything. So that's nice. Bastion All-in-One, that's new. You have some of those. You can look in those. Why did I say that I don't prefer an all-in-one book? Variety. I like to kind of keep the lesson moving by transitioning into a totally different book. Do you find that a little child would enjoy 6 shorter books than one very long book? As I read to my 6-year-old at night. She prefers 6 shorter stories than one long one. Okay, part of it is attention span. Also, the narratives are often simpler in a shorter book. So that's something that you want to be mindful of. Celebrate series. I have used this. They have some really neat music and they're creatively done. The duets are always great fun. the one thing that they are more expensive. So that's something to consider. They are very nice, but they are probably $3 to $4 more per book. That gets to be a pretty significant chunk of money when you're maybe there's 2 kids they're paying for. So just keep that in mind. So at that age, they're more coordinated physically. They usually can read. Literacy is your job, not the method, okay? Sorry, the writing's kind of small there. Be really watchful of if they're always watching their hands and not the music, they're listening to you play and then just play back. Is your training and developing their ear a good thing? Absolutely. But do we want them to be dependent on that? So one thing I love is either Faber series has a sight reading book that goes right along with it. I also have 4-star sight reading books. I also have another series of sight reading. It's like Sight, See, Hear. It's really good. And I've done that with students, especially ones that struggle with reading. We all have natural affinities towards different skills. And for those that maybe I can sense that their reading skills are behind, or I've had a Suzuki transfer. How does Suzuki present and teach? A lot of ear training. Is that valuable? And are they going to be really strong musically? Usually, which is a gift, and I want to not acknowledge that. So what I've done with those transfer students is we do tons of sight reading, tons and tons of sight reading. I start with things they're familiar with, though, so that we can start where they feel competent, they feel pretty good about that. So it's not true sight reading because they are familiar with the tunes. So for someone in our background of going to church, have them sight read hymns, have them sight read classical songs that are extremely familiar, like arrangements of Burleigh's, or that they're going to already know. So it'll be like a framework. And eventually you're going to go to where they've never seen it, heard it, it's obscure, but you're going to gradually grow there. So that's how I would handle that. You want to be really creative with your supplementary materials. You want to have your finger to the pulse of their interest. If you sense that they're getting a little restless and bored, you need to be like, okay, what book could be really fun to do? So Faber has tons and tons of like fun series where it's like Disney or Greatest Showman or pop songs or hymns if they love hymns. Pay attention. Get them involved doing some fun music. And be like, okay, I still want you to work on the things that we've been doing, but I'd like you to have a choice piece every week. And that's going to be something that you just let me know what you'd like to do. And we are matching up. Faber tells you what they go with. Alfred has quite a few like hymns and some pop series that you'll know it's level 2 or level 3. And that's great for them. They are familiar with it. They enjoy that. I have my middle school girl playing like Shake It Off and total silly songs, but she's enjoying it, and it's fun for her to have variety in her lessons. We do have serious classical stuff too, but it's not all serious. Is the child already gone at age 13, or is there still some left? What do you think? There's still some there. And we don't need to rush them into becoming, and if they quit at age 12 or 13, are they going to play a lot of classical repertoire? How much if they quit?
If they're not playing any, they won't play any.
Just 0. So if I can get them through that difficult phase of transitioning from adult or childhood into adulthood, I want to give them every chance I can. Being interested and engaged. There are supplementary things like scale and core books. I have tons and tons of things that I use and you can just pass that around. Every publisher has a whole catalog. I don't have a catalog for every one of them. You have some of them. But you can have tons of resources. I have that whole shelf at the top, right above Music is Life, and That's Why Our Hearts Have Beats. That's all supplementary. It's for a child, so not for you guys. So all of the college pianists, you will almost never see something from there. But for a child that I see that they need to fall in love with the piano again. They're bored. They're maybe something tragic has happened. You know, passing a loved one, or a move, or even the passing of a beloved pet. Giving them a piece, like I've pulled out In Remembrance for a Child at those seasons. Not all of your learning needs to be done at the piano. I love having an open space to be away from the keyboard. The keyboard is great, but if we need to come away and I like to sit on the floor with them, or I can sing while holding their hand, whatever. We need brain breaks. Have you ever noticed that? I watch you guys as you're sitting there. Sometimes you'll just stare off in the window for just a second, and then you're back engaged. I don't see that as like, oh, she's not paying attention. Your brain actually needs those moments of gap and rest. It's a researched fact. And when we don't get those, we often cannot learn. So a great teacher does allow points of not as engaging of or intense of an activity, so that your brain does get a chance to kind of refresh. So the fall board is a wonderful tool as well. I'll play like knocking games on the fall board. I will pretend to play their song that's upcoming on the fall board, because does it sound like are you going to make any mistakes when you're on the fall board? No, you can focus more on technical, and like if they have to go hand over hand, get an experience of that before. And then before I even have them actually play, once we're on the keys, I have them pretend to play on the keys. And then you can see problems and fix them before they actually even play a note. Because a lot of kids hate that feeling of, I made a mistake. Where if we can kind of prevent that as much as we can, that's great, okay? Reading approaches. So I don't know how far along we'll go with this, but this is really critical. And as you are studying your methods, all of these will have either a blended of all three reading approaches, or one, or a variation on one of these. But it's important for you to be aware. Because if you know this is a landmark approach, will you be aware of some of the weaknesses that that approach might have, that you might need to do more things to supplement? Okay, so you know Suzuki is extremely ear-based. So if you're a really with-it teacher and really brilliant, you could probably do Suzuki successfully as long as you were doing enough supplementary reading and other activities, if that makes sense. And incorporating theory. Have you ever seen a Suzuki theory book? Often a Suzuki student, their playing is magnificent. But then you ask them a question and it's like, they don't even know a thing about what they just played. So that's an area that you would have to address. And if you were really on top of it, you would have activities that would make up for that. I'm not saying you need to teach Suzuki, but you could make it work for your own purposes, as long as you're really on it. So middle C reading approach, multi-key reading approach, intervallic reading approach. This is addressed very, very well in the Well-Tempered Keyboard Teacher. So for those of you reading that, you could read this section. I think that would really help you in understanding the different ways. You know that there are different ways to teach reading, correct? How did you learn to read?
Is it like phonetically?
Phonetically?
And like, what is it? Sight.
Sight. And I would say that I was taught via Becca from Pensacola Christian. They did a fantastic job. I would say it was blended. We had phonetics, but we also memorized tons of sight words. So it was both. And I think the best methods are both. They're not just coming from one perspective, they're both. So the middle C approach, is middle C important? I would say it is important. I would say the meat and potatoes part of the piano is kind of between treble C and bass C, those two octaves. Would you agree with that? That a lot of music is kind of in that zone. That's our singing range as well. I mean, most commonly. So it is important, but what happens, have you ever, even in yourself, if I asked you to transpose the piece that you're working on into a different key or a different place in the piano, would you struggle? Would it be hard? So it's very, very important. So when you're doing middle C, I did introduce C to my kids, but I also wanted them to identify, let's find all the C's on the piano and see that there's so many other ones, high and low. So you can have them experiment with middle C and you can say, hey, let's move up to the next highest C. This one's treble C. Now let's go to even one higher, so that you're not stuck in one position. So you can combat it. You just need to be aware of, if you let the child for the first month of lessons hover in this shared middle C spot, they fall to pieces. They're not really reading. They've learned a position, which is not great. So it's like another weakness different than Suzuki. So students are reading finger numbers, not really note names. Okay? And so that's something that's really interesting. And you'll even see with a stringed player that they will look for finger numbers quite often and not be really reading notes. I know that that is very, very common. And even my daughter, sometimes tempted, they don't want to read what it is. They want me to write a finger number. I'm not going to do it. They need to learn to read. I drilled a lot of flashcards. So it delays transfer of knowledge. So that would be a, it does develop an awareness of, like, they can see their hand really well when it's right in front of their nose. So that's positive. Easy to see on the piano. Middle C has kitty whiskers. Always has it running right through there. Even if it's the bass middle C or the treble middle C, it always is going to have one kitty whisker. Restricts information to an absorbable amount. That would be commendable. Okay. So I only have 2 minutes. So I think what we'll do is not talk about the multi-key approach. Do you guys know if when you learned you had a middle C approach?
I think, isn't Faber middle C approach?
Faber is middle C.
I was like teaching yesterday, and I was like, this thumb is like in a really random spot, and they like are just reading the notes based on the numbers, and I'm like, ah.
My little 8-year-old boy, he only knows. I'm like, what note is that? And he's like,
So, okay, as you are reflecting on that, Faber would call, they actually think that they have a landmark approach. So they start with C and then they're going to go to F and then they're going to go to treble G. So they're more thinking they're a landmark approach. Alfred has even more middle C centered than Faber, okay?
Maybe it's like Faber at the beginning, it just like sees it.
So I want you to notice with my daughters how little I did with the book. How little I did with the book. I want to get as keen staff notation connections as I possibly can, even before we're doing anything, and experimenting with locations. It's time to go, okay? But hopefully you will not be bound by what the book says. Have them try the song in a different C. Say, can you discover a different C and play this exact same thing? And identify that on the staff for where that is. Have them write it out. So you can address it. You just have to be really on it, okay? We can't be mindlessly going about that. So let's
move your cup so I can read the rest of it.
Yeah, sure.
Yay.
So I'm going to do something. Stop the video.
The little girl I did my first lesson, like she had her interview lesson. phone with me. I didn't even use the push.